thanks to COVID-19, with the pandemic, there's a dramatic shift in the way the world works, right?
Yeah.
In the way the consumers are interacting, how there's time, how their buying and purchase behaviors. You've often talked about the acceleration towards digital and how businesses should keep investing to keep up. What do you think has changed the most dramatically in the past year?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think I think the question would need to be what has not changed. I mean, I think it's sort of hard to think of anything that has changed. It has not changed. I mean, clearly, I think the shift to digital it is most sort of the most profound shift, but it's changed everything. The way we work, the way we shop, the way we communicate, the way we keep in touch with our friends and family, the way we educate our kids. Here in the UK, there's a big debate about getting people back into the office. Today at WPP, we have 100,000 people around the world, and roughly, in the UK, 3% are in the office. In the US, 1%, and in India, 0% are working, from the office at the moment. And it's amazing what we've been able to do. And actually, it's more profound than just whether you're doing your work in the office or not. It's how you work and where you work. So I think everything has really shifted, and it's going to have a massive impact on society and the way we interact and on business. So it's the level of disruption is going to be extremely significant over the 2 to 3 years.
Got it. And Mark, from your viewpoint on consumers, right? How are they spending time, and what do you think has changed in terms of core consumer behaviors and trends during this period? And do you think this is a temporary shift, or do you think this is here to stay?
Yeah, well, look, I think clearly it's here to stay. And we've seen, I think, an acceleration of trends that were previously taking place. The three big ones would be a shift to online media, a shift to e-commerce, and then, in our industry, really growth in the importance of purpose and corporate reputation and doing the right thing as well as being seen to do the right thing. Doing the right thing is more important than being seen to do it. I think consumers are much more interested in what companies do, and they've moved much of their work online. We're seeing increases in e-commerce of 50%. So what would have taken 5 years to take place has taken place in 5 weeks, and that is not going to go back the other way. Some of it might slip back, but it's not going to go back in the main. So those businesses that have had and invested in an online presence are those businesses that are going to do best, during the pandemic. And as we come out of it, and that applies to how people. I defy you to think of something that's not online. We had this sort of debate, and someone said, "Well, you can't get your hair cut." Well, actually, you can get an online hair consultation. In the UK, your partner will be sort of talked through how to cut your hair. But you look at businesses that have been built, in exercise like Peloton. Remote consultations for doctors, something that people were really reluctant to do, now is very very much more common. And there are challenges with lots of these things, but I think the behaviour is not going to go back in any way.
Got it. Yeah, we're seeing that trend, Mark. We're seeing massive consumption of media online. We're seeing massive consumption of education-related technologies. A lot of stuff around digital healthcare, and a lot of stuff around new growth verticals like gaming and a few others. But it's hard, Mark, when you're a traditional business and you have a brick and mortar storefront. Either you're in retail, or you're in fast-moving consumer goods, or you're in the white goods space. What's your guidance in terms of how you've seen businesses that are not just digital, but truly, I would say, traditional businesses adapt and apply technology when it comes to reaching out to consumers?
No, look, I think that one question is attitude. Is this a threat or an opportunity? And I think the answer clearly is it's both. But if you approach it as an opportunity and a threat, you'll make progress. Secondly, that's why there are entrepreneurs like you around. People who spot opportunities and can move more quickly than traditional companies. But I think traditional companies do have tremendous assets. They have brands, they have customers, supply chains, and manufacturing. they have to figure out, which of those things are truly going to be assets in the future, and which are going to be, sort of millstones around their neck, if you like, which will accelerate their progress and which will hinder it. And I think the big companies have struggled. In the old days, if I can say, there used to be in this context of the adoption curve. You remember that? A company would launch something and consumers would adopt it. But now I think it's the reverse adoption curve. Consumers do things, companies are struggling to keep up with consumers because the iPhone or the mobile phone has democratized technology in a way like no other. I mean, I remember speaking at this event, I think 13 or 14 years ago, before the iPhone was launched in 2007. And we had this long debate about mobile marketing and would it take off. Well, all it needed was a device to devise innovation. And that is what the mobile device has done. And, with more than 900 million users in India, you can see a tremendous, everyone has in their pocket a machine with the power, that sent a man to the moon, with the world's information at their fingertips, the ability to pay and educate and do everything online. So I think that, it's this democratization of innovation is good. Now, with that comes, a concentration of wealth and power. If we look at the valuation of the large technology companies, there is a shift in wealth to those large companies. And I think as technology enters more industries, you may see a continued, shift in power to the largest people that can use that they create. But that's another discussion, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess so. And Mark, in your experience, when you've also been the CEO of WPP Digital, and you kind of led WPP's digital foray for a whole bunch very successfully, driving a whole bunch of innovations. When you think about your journey and you think about the ecosystem today, which is getting very complex, right? You talked about digital companies, you talked about managing omni-channels, you talked about moving fast. But when you think about just pure digital businesses, how do you think about data, platforms, and then this whole, the whole media jargon around search, around commerce, around display, around video? How do you think brands need to move in this complex environment to manage multi-channels or omni-channels with all of this, with this play of data and platform, yet keeping the consumer experience integral?
Yeah, look. I think. I mean, I'll make one observation about WPP Digital. I mean, we set up sort of WPP Digital as a vertical alongside the rest of WPP to drive innovation. And we used to say, when our job is done, we'll eliminate WPP Digital because the whole company will be digital. And I think if we made a mistake, we didn't move quickly enough to do that. I think that the reality is we do live in an omni-channel world. Not everything is digital. And it is about integrating physical and digital. Amazon are launching stores, So I think that you have to integrate the traditional and the digital. And if you don't do that, you end up with one part of the organization growing and one part of the organization declining, and that's impossible. So what we've been trying to do at WPP over the last 2 years really is to integrate the traditional and the digital, because I think together they're much more powerful, and the whole thing is powered by technology. And I think every company today has to be a technology company. Maybe not a technology company like an Adobe, or Facebook, or Google, but really be adept at using technology to connect with consumers. And you have to understand where consumers are going, and then how you can interact with them from how you can collect the data from your interactions, build relationships using technology, and serve them in this new way. And I think that really having a focus, from the top of the organization on technology and where that's going, is critical. And that's very challenging for large companies who, by definition, have had silos built up over the years, departments. Consumers approach, companies are organized sort of vertically by department, but consumers experience you horizontally. When you go to a banking app, you experienced a combination of, the finance department, the IT department, the legal department, the marketing department, all coming together to build your app. It's a nightmare. When you go to an online banking startup, it's a group of people who come together to build your app. And so by definition, they're much more interested. And I think taking that leap from the siloed vertical organization to a more agile, flexible, faster organization is what you need to do. And in a sense, that's what we're trying to do at WPP. And it's complicated with a company of 100,000 people. But I think that we're making, tremendous progress. And actually, this sort of pandemic and the chases that it's forced on us to work faster, to look at data more quickly. I was talking to Srini about what we're doing in India. We've moved over the last 3 months to like a much more continuous view of data. We look at trends weekly, not annually. And, that means we're much closer to the customer. We're much quicker to respond. And so marketing, becomes a sort of always on process rather than this waterfall process. We're much agile. We're making work more quickly. I was speaking to our sort of rising, I did a session with some sort of our rising talent in the UK. We made a TV commercial in 16 days. I can tell you with that client, we would have been hard pushed to do it in 16 weeks before the pandemic. So that's a tenfold increase in sort of process speed. So all of these things, I think, are what's going to change how companies need to react. And in a way, we can't forget the lessons of the last 2 months in how we work with clients and how we organize.
I think that's beautifully said. I think my big takeaway from that, Mark, is, for companies, they've got to build very consistent, continuous, and seamless experiences for their customers, not exposing their org chart, to clients, right? It's like almost picking up a phone saying dial X for Y, 1 for this and 2 for that, and really build a seamless journey. And I think you contrasted startups being a lot more agile. And I love the other part about having your ear to the ground with direct relationships with consumers, because I think today the opportunity to transform marketing, your messaging, not only by location, not only by language, but by consumer preferences, and knowing some of their past history is the big opportunity there. So thanks so much for sharing that. I think that was a great way for me. Looking into the future and what matters next, how do you think, or what do you think is going to be the next big wave in technology, innovation, and marketing? If I think about that intersection, what do you see as some big trends that are playing out globally that you think we should be aware of in India?
I think that the sort of enablement of working in this new way is going to be a massive expansion. I think video, I just looked at my own diary. During the pandemic, I saw 50% more clients than I did for the same period last year, but each meeting was half as long, so maybe I was twice as efficient. This time last year, I did one video call. Over the last 3 months with clients, it was closer to 100. So I've a 100-fold increase in adoption of video conferencing. I think there's a lot of innovation to come around connecting with consumers using video, flexible working, events. We're doing this on a Cisco event. There'll be, we're looking at a WPP leadership conference, sort of event planning software. Look at the growth, of TikTok. A lot of the apps that people have been using have connected. It's ironic, I think, but at a time when we've been sort of locked at home and sort of physically separated, in some ways we're closer together than we've ever been. Pre-March, to do this conference, I would have imagined I had to fly to India, would take 3 days, cost a lot of money, and not be so good for the planet. Now we can do this in this way. It's not as good as it used to. It's not as good as it was, but I'd say it's much better and certainly more efficient. So I think video in all its forms is really going to be a sort of area of explosion. And then clearly the big economic driver is going to be e-commerce and a shift to basically most things that can sell online will transact online. With that will come things like payment systems, CRM programs, sort of direct everything sort of direct to consumer. So people will be looking to reinvent the supply chain. Packaged goods companies will be looking at that as well. So I think that's it. And then the other trend I think that's really important, and certainly very important to us at WPP, is purpose.
Yes.
I think that the sort of the last 3 months has been a lot of self-reflection. A lot of people have looked at how companies have behaved and what they've done and how they treated their people and their customers and what they've done. Have they been on the side of customers? We've done work. We work with Colgate to provide an online sort of dental service. We've done a lot of work with clients around, not just sort of corporate video ads make people look, but actual proper programs that touch people directly. And so I think that the variety of social issues and purpose is important. There's some sort of background noise, man. Is that? If someone could go on mute.
I don't know. I can hear that as well. I can hear the background noise. Maybe I'm going to go on mute when you're talking. I'll probably do that. I'll do that. Yeah. So, Mark, no, thanks for that. I think those trends that you talked about, the one that stood out for me was purpose. And I think all of us need to be thinking about a purpose-driven organization, a purpose-driven culture, and really redefining what we stand for, being truly mission-driven. And then, if we feel like that as organizations, we could extend that to our clients and customers and, society at large as well. But thanks for sharing some of the other trends. Mark, in an interview that you did in 2019, I was looking at it. You had, interestingly, what makes India stand apart is that it is one place or one market where both traditional media and new media were growing for a period of time, right? And in this year, we've seen kind of digital accelerate to become the second largest medium after television. And in the next probably 2 years, 2 or 3 years, it'll probably become the largest medium like it has in most parts of the world. It's a market that believes in creativity. It believes in the value of ideas. So what is your take on the power of creators and communities in reviving consumer purchase sentiment? Because we have gone through a little bit of an economic dip during the pandemic, and especially with the opportunities that have presented themselves recently, beyond COVID. How do you see the power of communities really driving customer purchase sentiment and behavior?
Yeah, look, I mean, India is clearly a creative place. I saw Piyush is on there's a Netflix series I saw about creators. So in the US, we make Netflix series about sort of real estate developers, selling some, what is it called? And in India, they make them creative class. So I think it shows the importance of creators in India clearly. Look, I think that marketing today is a creative process and a technology-driven process. And I think over the years, my frustrations to sometimes with the sort of startups is they're great at doing technology, but without something creative on the technology, there isn't really much point in having it. And I do think that we forget the value of understanding consumer behavior. We do forget the value of insights and creative ideas. At the same time, you can use your sort of programmatic media to improve the efficiency of your media spend by 10 or 15%. If you have a great idea, you can multiply the value by 10. And I would rather be, I think we need both, but I think that the types of people that can multiply the value of an idea by 10 are the types of people that exist inside, WPP and companies like ours in our industry. And that's what our industry does for clients. We have ideas that engage and inspire consumers. And I do think you're right that we are going to have to listen very carefully to people. I mean, we forget the human cost of this pandemic, both in terms of lives, more than 800,000 lives, have been lost around the world, and a disruption to people's jobs, a number of people unemployed, economic disruption and dislocation. And as we come out of it, many people will be in very, very different states. Some will be evicted, some will have lost loved ones, some will be in, some financial difficulty. And so I do think that we are going to have to understand where people are and communicate with them in the right way. And so sort of sensitivity and ideas, I think, are going to be critical.
Well, thank you for sharing. I think WPP does an absolutely stellar job, Mark, around left brain and right brain thinking with both the trading side as well as the data driven side with everything that you do. Mark, one final question before we just turn it over to one or two questions that we've got from the audience. How, in your opinion, can brands leverage the power of language and communication uh, dealing with this very diverse audience in India? Where English consumption is about 200 million people off the 1.3 or 1.35 billion. How do you think? What, in your opinion, can brands do to really leverage the power of language?
Yeah. Look, clearly, the lesson number one in communication is relevance, right? In terms of timing or information or the way you talk to people. So I think there's nothing better than talking to people in their own language, and so I would say that brands should embrace it as much as they can. And I think that those platforms clearly that talk to people in the language they understand best will be ones that do best. And I know that that's a topic like close to your heart, if you like. But I think that technology enables us to do that. Why was there one massive English language newspaper? Well, because of all of the complexities of producing newspapers, it was hard to do it in 30 different languages. If the technology had enabled it, sure, perhaps the Times of India would not be written in English. I don't know, something else. So I do think clearly, India is such a sort of vibrant and diverse society, and that's the fantastic thing about the country. And I think it's fantastic that you have languages that bring people together, but I also think it's fantastic that you have languages that represent, people and where they come from and what they believe in. And so I think is clearly very relevant, and probably they'll understand something when they're spoken to in English as well, if you know what I mean. So I think it's clearly critical.
Very, very clear. Mark, we have a question from the audience in terms of, how do you think small and medium businesses should react to the pandemic? Because, they're the most impacted, you could argue. How should they behave in terms of not losing out on customers during this pandemic, right? So I think the question is very focused on small businesses, which form a vibrant part of our economy, almost 30% plus of our GDP. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things you saw in our results is we had relative resilience from our largest clients, and I think that you're right. That one of the tragedies of this pandemic is that small businesses have been most impacted. What at the same time I've been impressed by is the innovation and entrepreneurship of small business owners. From people that converted their restaurants to takeaways, their takeaways to shops. I mean, here in London, we have a lot of pizza restaurants, and within days of the lockdown, they converted themselves into shops, selling pasta and doing delivery and doing takeaway. So I think that small businesses will find a way to innovate and come back. And I very much hope that that's the case. One of the challenges we face in London is with people not coming to the centre of London. There are a lot of people that run small businesses that serve workers. And I'm sure it's the case in Delhi and Mumbai. A lot of people service people that work in offices. Where there aren't people in offices, they have no living. So, but I think that we should support small businesses, and we try to as much as we can. But I do think that they're natural entrepreneurs. They're close to the customer, and I figure out what the new opportunities are and ways of coming back. And look, it's interesting as well in India. With the TikTok situation, the explosion of Indian entrepreneurship in the app space. And I think it's really intriguing, and it may lead to a permanent, increase in sort of Indian entrepreneurship in the mobile space, and much more relevant innovation. I think that's really intriguing as well.
Yeah, and thanks for highlighting that. I think a lot of us have taken advantage of that. I've heard some very heartening stories of small businesses that were in manufacturing of garments that kind of pivoted towards performance fabrics and PPE and medical supply. The example that you gave about restaurants transforming themselves is great. A lot of us in the startup world who are addressing the short video opportunity are doing that as well, post the TikTok ban. And I think the heart to that is innovation and pivoting and moving really fast. So thanks for sharing that. Mark, we have another question from the audience. And this is it's a very simple question, but I like the way it's framed. You're a big proponent of digital. You've always highlighted its importance, but this is talking about in the clutter of the digital media world, how do brands stay really authentic and relevant? It's easier when it's face to face, but it's harder when it's digital. Would love to get your insights there.
Yeah, I think that's about using data, isn't it? Because if you know someone's just done something or what they've done in the past, and you have sort of permission to use it, the privacy things are signed up, then you have the ability to replicate the insights and knowledge of the local shop owner, in a massive platform at scale. So I think that using data to power your ideas. I think you can still talk, you can still talk to people in a relevant way. Creativity is not dead on the internet, if you like. In fact, it's very alive. So, but I think data is the key difference. Digital media has, and so using it to drive relevance is critical.
Got it. One last question, Mark, before we go. And this is more in terms of how do you see India playing out? You're very close to the country. You travel so often. You've talked about its vibrancy. Yeah. It's got so much media, right? It's like a land full of diverse media. What is your belief will be the media transformation that India will see in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I'm very positive about the growth of India. I mean, one of the reasons we were there was to sort of, make sure that we had the right investment plan for WPP. I think that we will look to invest. I think there's a big role across our business as a technology development hub, not just for companies outside of India, but indeed, but for companies inside India, and for companies in India going abroad. So I think all of those things, really are going to be critical. So I'm absolutely 100% optimistic about the country and its potential. Every country has short-term challenges, and the political challenges around the world are pretty pronounced everywhere at the moment. But I think that from an economic perspective, there's a lot of growth ahead for the Indian market, and it will play a big part. Certainly, I hope in WPP's future, and I'm sure other companies as well.
Thank you, Mark. On that note, I'm going to sign off. We're exactly at the end of time. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I look forward to catching up over your next visit. Until then, stay safe and all the very best.
Look forward to it as well. I don't know when it will be, but I'm looking forward to it whenever it is. So thanks, Umang. Thanks for your questions, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Reed and Mr. Baby, for being here with us today. I would also like to thank our silver partners, Fireside and ShareChat, and our creative partners, Blink. Requesting all the delegates to please take out time and visit our exhibitors and check out their offerings. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.